Thanks a lot for coming, guys. Really, really appreciate it. Quickly, what we thought we'd do is rather than me introduce them, I'm just going to let the three of them introduce themselves, talk a little bit about what they do, organisations they work for, and then we'll go from there. So, Lizzie, how about we start with you?
Sure. Hi, I'm Lizzie, CEO and co-founder of ZestMoney. And we are now, I think, the largest online digital consumer lending company in India. We're a 3.5-year-old company formed by a group of people that used to work for a UK fintech called Wonga. Some of you might know, controversial. And we are the fastest and the most loved digital credit product in the market. We have about 6 million customers, which would make us the 5th biggest credit card company if we issued cards. But we don't issue cards because we think cards should die and that everything should be completely digital. So we've been a Mambu customer since day zero. I think we were the first in the region, and it's been a very, very fun ride.
Dennis?
Yeah, thanks, Miles. So my name is Dennis Tromnicek. Miles did pretty good with pronouncing my last name.
I always get the hard ones.
So I'm originally from Germany, but I spent the last 10 years in the Asia-Pacific region, currently looking after PwC's digital banking proposition across the region. So I was personally involved in setting up digital challenger banks. We work a lot at the moment with the applicants for the virtual banking licenses that are issued in Singapore, Malaysia. I've been helping the guys in Hong Kong with doing the same thing. And yeah, thanks for having me today. Looking forward to this discussion.
And I'm Barry. I'm from the Wallet Engine. We're active in Singapore and the Philippines at the moment as a stored value facility. And what we do is we basically work with current established online communities to provide wallets for them as a service. So the idea is that we're not a business-to-customer implementation, we're a business-to-business implementation, and we work with large online communities that already exist, setting up wallet infrastructures for them as a service. We signed a deal with Mambu middle of summer, and we're currently in the testing stage of our new core banking platform, and we'll be going live with it hopefully in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Excellent. All right, so how about I start with this technical difficulties, so we're changing on the fly here. So maybe first question to the panel, and probably just to all of you, and happy for you to chime in, but how has the banking landscape evolved in the past couple of years, particularly from a global perspective, and now it's becoming certainly a lot more regionalised and very focused on the region. So happy for the three of you to jump in.
So maybe I'll take a first go at it. I think the first thing is important. You said the banking landscape and not the bank landscape. That's a very big and very important differentiation from my perspective, because if I look back like 10 years ago, the projects that we did was actually with banks. No, I work with fintechs, telecommunication companies, social media companies, right? They're all looking at it. So while the banking itself hasn't evolved from a product perspective that much, is changing a lot, the participants in the system have actually changed quite a bit. And it's an interesting question now, and I talk to regulators in the region, say like, what's your take on it? What's going to happen? They're saying, we want to protect the system, but we not necessarily want to protect the participants. So I think what we're seeing now is that the banking is decoupling from the bank as a financial institution. We're also seeing a drive for more digital enabled banking. We see a lot less importance for the branch and the traditional ways of doing it. It's becoming much more digitally enabled. And therefore, we're going into a more customer-focused banking experience. And we in Asia Pacific have a unique opportunity here because of the demographics of the population, that we actually have a huge population, much younger than in Europe and US. So that's opening up a lot of opportunity to go along.
Yeah, I think we echo that. I obviously have a very India-centric viewpoint, but just to give people, I think, a vision of it, because it is a vision of the future, India and China. I think they give you kind of what Europe could be one day. 85% of India is under the age of 44. So all the customers that are coming online today do not have that legacy mindset of what a banking product looks like. things like credit cards, personal loans don't mean anything to young people that haven't been exposed to them. And then at the same time, this is a population of people who've never seen a desktop, even a laptop, actually. 95% of our customers have never accessed us through anything other than a mobile phone. And they're addicted to a mobile phone. They use it, especially in India, much more than they do in Europe. So they're consuming content at 10 times cheaper pricing than even the cheapest pricing in Europe, which means the amount of content they consume all day long across their life affects the way they behave and interact with that device, so much so that it's really a part of their physical persona. And that means the kinds of products that banking delivers have to be completely different. It's got to be part of that digital ecosystem for them. They don't want to go and do something with a bank. Frankly, even a bank app doesn't make sense anymore. They need products that are integrated within that content and that delivery system that they're now completely addicted to. And we definitely see in Origin, actually banks have figured it out. They understand. So they're getting very good at partnering with big tech companies. So I think the future of banking is how does tech and banks stick together?
To a certain extent, we're sitting in a beautiful metaphor for the subject here. 80 years ago, somebody sat down in front of the board of directors of a bank and persuaded them that building this beautiful building was the best-in-class way for them to move forward in banking, to run their core banking operations from. And here we are now kind of using it for something completely different. Equally, traditionally, banking their business case relied on customers either borrowing money or saving money. And for certainly in the emerging markets where people tend to earn a wage rather than draw a salary, and so their financial cycle is almost a weekly hand-to-mouth kind of scenario, they just fell completely under the radar for banks in the traditional sense. Whereas now with evolving technology and evolving regulation and stored service providers and wallet providers, all of a sudden there's a new industry forming to serve those customers digitally who were never financially included before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really interesting time with that, and there's going to be a lot of change over the next few years. I'll ask this question to you, Dennis, if it's okay. So HKMA, MAS, and the BNM are all talking about virtual digital banking licenses, and they're all announced and they are releasing them over the next period. What do you think this means for the traditional banks?
It's an interesting question, right? And if you look at the different markets and the different impacts that's having, I think the first thing we are seeing is it is a catalyst for change, right? It actually accelerates the thinking whether the banks are going to apply for a virtual license with a partner or they need to take a defensive, offensive strategy. What I mean by that is they need to protect what they're doing, but they cannot protect it by doing exactly what they're doing now. So they're trying to do something differently, which caters more to what Lizzie actually mentioned earlier around providing an experience, supplementing a lifestyle, and then there's some banking products in there, but that's actually happening along with that. The other thing that we see, I think, is happening through that is depending on the market you're looking at, but some of them have been very prescriptive in terms of what they actually want to do. So if you look at Singapore, the monetary authority there is pretty clear that actually the applicants for virtual banking licenses, in order to be granted a license, need to address black spots in the current financial system. So they need to take care of SMEs who currently not have a bank to bank with. They need to think about like, how do we bank for, and that's more a Malaysian question than a Singapore, because Singapore is a pretty wealthy country, but in Malaysia there is a big population that's actually currently unbanked, and that's going to need to be part of the value proposition of the applicants as well. So they're using this vehicle to drive some change into the markets that's needed, A, to provide better financial outcome or financial services to the gross of population and the companies, B, to drive innovation through those markets and forcing the banks as the institutions to either change or become more or less irrelevant. And thirdly, basically, driving a better outcome for the consumer. I'm a firm believer in that this exercise is going to figure out what's the best outcome for the consumer, and it's a real catalyst of change in those markets.
Do you think it's a trend we're going to continue to see? So obviously you've got Singapore, Malaysia. Do you think you're going to start seeing it coming out in other countries in the region? I mean, Lizzie, from your perspective, do you see any indication that the central bank in India is thinking about going down this path as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, India kind of put the gauntlet out there 5 years ago, said we'll be a digital first economy. This is the way our entire industry and economy will go. And that was a signal to people like Google, Facebook to come and invest in financial services in the market. And then now as a government, they're reacting with regulation that will enforce all of that. If you don't know that India has actually the most progressive payments infrastructure in the world today, built by the government. So they set a non-for-profit organization called the National Payments Corporation of India about 10 years ago, actually. And they built the equivalent of faster payments or Venmo by the government, mandatory for every single bank to be on the platform. So we are one of the few countries in the world where we have instant P2P, P2M, money transfer 24/7 for free, which is an amazing ecosystem for anyone to build off of. And that is what has driven this amazing surge in mobile payment adoption by consumers over the last few years. So UPI, which is the product that was kind of launched on top of that platform, was really only launched about a year ago, honestly. And this month it will do $20 billion in P2P payment volume, which is just phenomenal. Like if that was your own company, you would just be so excited.
So I think, and I guess this is a really good segue to this question, which I guess really is for you, Lizzie, and for you, Barry, as well. But I mean, less than 3 decades ago, the idea of moving money with exactly what you're talking about through a mobile device, through a wallet, was just seemed impossible. But now it is the absolute surge in the trend, and you've seen vast improvements. What's next? Like, whereas, you talk about the infrastructure they've built in India, what's next? And if I look at organizations like yourselves and also what Wallet Engine's building, how do you guys play into that space?
Yeah, I mean, 3 decades is even being quite generous. I was reminded recently that 15 years ago, I was on a team building the first ever camera phone.
Wow.
And how far have we come within 15 years alone? At the time, we could never have even dreamt about the technology and the usability that mobile phones give us at the moment. And that's just going to continue to grow. Lizzie made the very good point that in Europe, we see it in the millennials, but in the emerging markets, we see it with people who are entering the mobile phone revolution for the first time ever at the moment. Their first interaction with mobile phones also enables their first interactions with financial services, et cetera, et cetera. So we're not seeing the same way in Europe. All kids had a bank account when they were young and grow up, and then they use a second bank account. I heard somebody earlier on talking about a second bank account. For an awful lot of people in the emerging markets, they've never been eligible for a bank account, and all of a sudden they're part of that community, and financial inclusion is a real thing for them that they strive for, and now we can achieve it.
Yeah, and you've seen that. I think there's a lot of markets, particularly in Asia Pacific, where the amount of unbanked is a scary percentage. I think places like the Philippines, it's as high as 65, 70%. So this is where I think you're really going to see these mechanisms, these technology will really sort of start to make a difference. Okay, great. General question to the three of you. What are the biggest challenges you face right now? And what do you think is the best way to tackle these challenges?
For me,
for you, it's going live.
For me right now, it's making sure everything works together. We're in that testing stage. For us, delivering to our customers' expectations over the next year is absolute focus. We've stopped all marketing activities. Our customer pipeline is already full through to the end of 2020, which is an amazing thing to be able to say. But now we face the challenge of actually delivering to the expectations of those customers. That growth stage obviously has all the pains that you can imagine. Finding staff that have the skill sets, and that's where the likes of Mambu come in terms of composable banking. We can approach vendor partners who specialize in each aspect of what we want to achieve. and we know we're getting best in class. We know we're getting scalable solutions to enable our growth down the line. And obviously, realistically, it's cheaper and faster than doing it ourselves as well.
And what about you, Lizzie? Because I mean, you're a little bit more further down the path,
Yeah.
and you are growing at an exponential rate. It's crazy.
We've solved a lot of the early stage problems. No, but I think more kind of holistically, what are the macro themes or headwinds that might come up in our region that affect all of us? And I think one really interesting topic right now is this balance between customer centricity and data privacy. And a lot of countries in our region are replicating Europe because, that's the right thing to do, and GDPR, but not necessarily looking at it through the lens of to provide financial inclusion, and especially in our space, which is to, effectively underwrite new to credit customers with no credit history. We do need to depend on alternative sources of data. And the customers are very happy and willing to submit that data freely because it gives them such a huge benefit, which is access to credit. But if we go down the path of copying GDPR, we're going to create so many barriers and challenges to customers. And it's a really nuanced topic. It's not easy to be really black and white about this and say, this is the right thing, because there's a fine balance. And then linked to that, something I really worry about is sort of customer education and understanding of all these topics. And in a market that's growing as fast as it is, there's a huge opportunity for very clever hackers and fraudsters to exploit customers' misunderstanding of financial services. And I think we all have a duty as providers of financial services to also provide financial literacy, which when we're all growing as fast as we are in a booming market is a really boring thing to say. And no one really wants to do that. But if we don't soon, we'll find that the attacks that we're getting are so, painful to our customers and to our business that it could slow us down.
And I mean, the same question to you, Dennis, but obviously your organisation is sort of one of the advisors that's trying to help these businesses to sort of tackle these challenges. How do you see it from your perspective?
So from my perspective, and that's more a broader question to the whole consulting industry, I'm a management consultant for 15 years, but our industry is changing as well. So one key challenge for me is relevance, because we want to provide relevant inputs into a very quickly changing market. And the traditional consulting model is, we've done that 10 times, here's the 3 best options for you, but that's not the way consulting can work in a changing market like that. So it's actually more changing the role of the consultant to become a partner rather than an advisor. And we help to ideate, we help to contribute into the equation and trying to help to drive out what's the best CVP, what's the best ideas, and filling that role. That's a change on our end, and that's a change on our client side as well. Right? The second thing I think that's difficult for us, or that's a challenge that we're trying to overcome, and that's part of what we're working on with Mambu, is the traditional kind of like PowerPoint producing tons of slides are over, right? And it's in a market like this not relevant. So we're trying to move what we call the asset-based advice. So we want to bring our own digital assets. Part of that is, as you're aware, Miles, we're working together on something called BankOS, which is a kind of like app store for banking, where we can bring certain things into it. Mambu is the core in that. But that's the second part. How do we actually bring that together? And then similar to the others is finding the right talent, because it's a super competitive market. I train someone for 2 years and they get hired away from the fintechs, whoever else. And it's very hard to keep the machine going and find the right talent. And then more importantly, retain the right talent, because the shining of the consulting industry has also depleted a little bit, and the fintech is like more sexier to work with. That's something we just have to compete with every day.
Okay.
One other thing is the change of pace in the regulatory, the pace of change in the regulatory market. So, for example, in Singapore, we have the new Payment Services Act coming live on the 1st of January. And while we've seen many consultation documents and things like that, we still don't have a final draft of the law that's coming into play on the 1st of January. So we're we're rolling out a Mambu platform at the moment based on what we think the law is going to say on the 1st of January. And we're just having to do that. We're having to put the horse before the cart and say, okay, here's what we're building. We think that's going to be compliant on the 1st of January. We're not 100% sure, but push comes to shove, we'll change it at the last minute. That's unheard of in the financial services industry, that we can be so close to January 1st and still not actually understand what law is going to be in place on the 1st of January.
It is a bit crazy. And I guess that's a really good segue to this question as well. So, take it back to a government level. Why is it important for governments to start embracing digital first technology and capability, yet you still see them, the underpinning things such as laws and regulations are still lagging behind. So they're pushing really hard from a digital first perspective, but yet the rest of it doesn't seem to follow. I mean, how does that impact someone like yourself that's trying to launch a business?
It's a challenge, but if it was easy, everyone would be doing it.
True.
I think, digital first is the only way to service this new generation of customers. These customers, I can still remember walking into a bricks and mortar bank with my father and being introduced to the bank manager to set up my first account. This new breed will never have a personal relationship with a bank manager, or they will never have
or a
somebody
passport,
like
you hope.
Yeah. Henry Hippo.
Yeah.
So the government's driving that sort of modern interaction is the only way for especially the emerging market governments to actually make sure that their citizens reach the financial inclusion that we need them to.
Do you think they're doing enough? I think that's a broad question, I guess.
It's difficult to see how they could do more quicker.
Yeah.
Okay.
But are they doing enough is a very subjective thing.
Yeah.
But on this one, I think we see a lot of examples in different countries in Asia Pacific, Southeast Asia, where the government is actually really pushing along. Take Thailand for an instance, right? The government set the Thailand 4.0 strategy. They pushed for the national payment strategy, forced the banks to participate into it. Today, it's for the wallets, but they wiped out the wallets because I'm living in Thailand, I can use my regular deposit account and pay for a QR code pretty much everywhere. Like even the small street store will have a QR code sticker and I can pay them with it, right? So that's a good example where the government has actually really pushed the advancement of the digital banking. They did the same thing with the national ID, which is going to go live hopefully very soon, where we can do a complete eKYC without any human touching it to open my accounts up, right? So you see that. Then you have other markets where the government's probably not that progressive, but my overall gut feel is that the governments and regulators in our region are actually looking more forward than in some other parts of the world. When I talk with colleagues who look at that in other parts of the world, we actually relatively fortunate, I would say, in terms of the governments trying to embrace it, because they know that's the only way they're going to cater for that growing middle class that's going to come into an income bracket where they actually need more financial services. We have a huge amount of people, right? I mean, if you look at countries like Indonesia, there's 260 million people there, right? And there's a lot of them moving into that middle class income now, so they're getting out of poverty, and the only way to cater for them is in a digital way, right? So I think that helps the governments, the regulators, and everyone to move. Could they do more? Yes. Could some of them be more cloud friendly? Yes, but my gut feel and my feeling is it's actually pretty okay in our region compared to many other regions of the world.
Absolutely, yeah. I think India wins on progressive regulation. We had a government that banned money overnight, literally, which, for all the shock horror of demonetization, it in the end didn't massively change consumer behavior, but it was a real shot across the bow to say to founders, entrepreneurs, bankers, we can remove currency. So, that's the kind of power that we have. We joke that the RBI in India is like a startup itself with a very aggressive release cycle, because every month we get new guidelines on something, and we have to react quickly and rebuild and rebuild. We rebuilt our KYC 6 times this year already, completely from scratch. But I hate to say it, that makes us, that's our job with fintechs. And if a fintech can't be bothered to rebuild its KYC 5 times, it shouldn't survive, really. And that's the whole point. So we sort of thrive in that environment. But yeah, I don't think RBI could do less. They really are keeping us on our toes right now.
Yeah, that's great.
And the only way you can move that quickly is by being a digital first business.
Exactly.
If
Correct.
you
Correct.
had a technology stack which was replicating
Correct.
old banking models or even liaising with legacy platforms. You just wouldn't be able to move that
So
quickly.
we built from day one principles of complete microservices architecture. And in the India market, we'd meet VCs and they didn't know what that meant. They just found that really boring. And then when this KYC debacle happened, we said, right, now we'll explain to you how microservices work. We have these 5 services, we can switch them on and off. So it's absolutely, it means really survival of the most advanced tech wins.
You touched on it before. We talked about data, and particularly the EU. So there seems to be a big adoption of GDPR. Seems to be the theme that we're sort of seeing right across the Asia Pacific region. What do you think the impact of that is, and how hard is it going to be for some of these countries that are basically going to move the needle from zero to absolute premium when it comes to data privacy and security?
Yeah, I get quite passionate about this topic. Well, because I think that particularly in markets like ours, we operate in a market where GDP per capita is $2,000. And even that's a weird number. Most people are living on a few dollars a day. And yet we're building companies that are apparently worth billions of dollars because they own data that belongs to the customer. And that feels very disingenuous in some ways. And so there's a real kind of psychological shift happening in our market, at least, that as a customer, I should own my data. And I think we are sort of conflicted there because we believe in that. But then what do we own as technology companies? Who does own that data? I think in our market specifically, and a lot of the region, bar China, it's 100% Android market, which means Google have a lot of data, a huge amount of data. And I think that the governments don't necessarily understand that, and banks definitely don't, the sort of power and quantity of that data. And so GDPR might be a slightly too simplistic framework for the types of, it's almost like, bolting the door when the horse is gone, because big, powerful companies already have a lot of data that really governments are not aware of, in my opinion.
But I think, let's set aside the regulation, but overall, I think in countries like China, in countries like Thailand, the consumer is actually not that worried about their data being used. And they're much more open in terms of like what they actually share, and it's actually okay from a personal perspective of the people. When I hear about like privacy concerns, etc., I think the more important part is get a bit more granular in the consent levels, right? I can pick a little bit more. It's not just yes or no. It's saying like you can share my transaction data, you can share whatever else, but providing that ability to be a bit more granular can cater for a lot of the concerns. And GDPR, I agree, is it's an overkill, basically. Yeah. It also drives some interesting behaviors that some of the clients that I work with say, like, look, we're going to just block Europe out and Europeans from our services because implementing this is going to cost us so much money that it's actually it works. It's kind of the same thing that happened with FATCA and Americans in a different context, right? But the point I was trying to say is like I'm from Germany originally, and I think Germany is a very data-conscious country, right? People are really concerned about their data. Yeah. In Thailand, actually, no one cares. They put everything on Facebook and everything, and they're okay. And I even have people who are saying, like, if this helps me, use my data. If this helps me with underwriting or getting a different credit scoring, I am okay with that, right? So that's a kind of like opposite mindset compared to a lot of the European countries where a lot of that regulation actually comes from, right?
Yeah. When we started, we came from the UK market, and we could not ask on an application form for credit in the UK, are you married or single? The drop-off rates were just phenomenal because that's a very personal question. In India, we could ask, what's your dog's wife's name? And people just want to submit a lot more information about themselves because they know that they'll get better products if they do. And it's a fantastic, environment to operate in for that reason.
So, Barry and Lizzie, so you guys, you're in a niche part of the market, and you're about to launch and be successful. You're already successful. How do you think, do organisations like yourselves continue to be niche? Or do you look at the relevance of how the big banks are struggling to, as Dennis goes, understand banking these days? Is it an opportunity for you guys? How do you see the relevance of yourselves versus the more established players in the market?
I think from our point of view, we're expecting to operate in a part of the market where the banks have just A, never been interested, and B, they can't move quick enough. So from our point of view, we're working with established online communities to actually switch on wallets for those communities. So each time we bring on one new customer, they're bringing a significant number of end users on the street behind them. So our growth is in steps like this. And the banks just will never have the products to service that sort of thing. As an SVF, we obviously have a much simpler product set. We're not allowed to offer interest. We're not allowed to loan money. We're a basic customer deposit account from a systems technology point of view. And again, that's traditionally not the sector where banks ever made money, and so it's not where they put their focus. And I think the people who are setting up technology stacks and then looking to build customer growth around it will lag, certainly in the markets that we're looking at, compared to our model, which is identify currently active online communities and enable financial stuff for them.
What about you?
Yeah,
Lizzie?
this is like the classic debate at the moment in every fintech gathering, which is, the unbundling versus bundling. Are we just all becoming banks again? And weren't we supposed to disrupt that? But I agree. I think particularly in our region, it's a really academic debate, because as long as you know who your customer is, and I think we're all identifying pockets of niche customer, not niche product to go after, that customer is completely underserved in so many different product categories. So we actually think about it completely differently. We're not, are we going to add this product or that product or this product? We're just going deeper and deeper into the life of our existing customer and asking them, what else do you want? What do you need from us? And sometimes it turns out it's products that don't actually exist in the world right now. So we're having to completely invent them and write them from scratch. We're designing a product right now, which is halfway between a credit account and halfway between a savings account, and it does a bit of both. It doesn't exist. No bank has conceptualized it. But that's the really exciting thing. So I think in our region, there's so much white space in so many categories and segments of the population that becoming a bank is not really a scary thought.
So to you, Dennis, so a similar question, but so the big banks know this is happening. They keep saying they're going to do something about it, yet they're so slow to move. What's holding them back?
So it's an interesting question, right? And it's hard to put them all into one bucket, because there is actually quite a few banks who are getting much better at it and who are moving, right? So if you look at Thailand, Siam Commercial is a good example, who have actually figured out how to move quicker. But generally it is, first of all, banks have been built in product silos for a long time, and a lot of the top management has grown to 10, 15 years of working in a product. It's very difficult for them to actually think in a customer journey, in a customer problem, and then figuring out that it actually maybe is a mix of a debit card, a credit card, combined with an FX product that I need to enable a travel journey, right? So that's one part. Another part, which not so often gets talked about, but I'm having these conversations in the boardrooms as well, a lot of them went through major core system replacements in the last 5 to 10 years. They still have huge amounts of money sitting on their books. And if you then go and say, look, we're actually going to move to Mambu or whatever else generation 3 technology, we turn off the old system, then you have the CFO saying, what am I going to do with the write-off of that? What's that going to mean to our results? So I think that's a consideration as well, that it's actually the investment that's still sitting on the book, and then how do we actually go about it? And the third thing is, while a lot of them talking about customer experience and all of that, they forget about the back office. They forget about the op risk guys. They forget about the compliance guys, even the legal guys. I mean, having built a digital challenger bank inside an existing bank, I went through these processes, and they are very often the drawbacks, basically, right? That you're actually not able to move quick enough. So in order for them to move, it's actually building something on the side is the best way from my perspective, completely decoupling it and then basically gradually building that up and moving the rest over. How many of them have been successful with that? There is a few good examples in our region, right, who actually have done that, but it requires very strong leadership, a committed executive team, and changes that really, really hurt, right? So it is not easy to go through that, but it's not impossible, right? And I think they need to move that way. Otherwise, they're not going to be around for much longer, right? That's my view.
Okay.
If you look at the Mambu customer base here present today, yes, we can see some of the legacy banking players, here in the room today, and they're starting to wake up and smell the coffee. But if you look at the companies that have done the superstars, the huge international growth and success over the last 3 to 4 years, it's the N26s, it's the ZestMoneys, it's that new breed of digital first companies that are experiencing that growth, and they're the ones we all aspire to be.
Mm. So last question to the group, and I think it's more about, so we talk about customer experience a lot, and I think that's the demand of the customers right now is personalization. So they don't want to just be all the same. So when they want to have a different personal experience, how do you cater for that now, but then also how do you think about how you're going to deliver that for the future, because that is your point of difference. How do you deal with that?
It's data, isn't it? So again, having built, mobile first, microservices first, completely cloud-based, it's very easy to build a good data architecture as well from day one, which is something that also having worked within a bank and trying to use their back-end system to build a cool front end, the biggest challenge was the legacy system architecture impacting the level of personalization we could ever do to the customer. We simply couldn't access data from their history to their present day, right? And that's a genuine problem all banks face. We don't have that problem. So from day one, we could design for extremely high levels of personalization, which I think is really one of the core things that defines, most of the killer products of the last few years in financial services. And India is the best hotbed in the world for personalization. We have 23 languages. We have such a diversity of income level, regional behaviors, tastes, flavors, that it's just a data scientist's dream come true. So we've just launched an insurance product, and it's just the most amazing kind of micro-segmentation project that we've ever done. It's really exciting to be able to design bespoke insurance premium for customers based simply on transaction data. We didn't have any additional inputs. We just said, look at this guy. What has he done over the last 3 years? Right, what would he need to make his life better for the next 3 years? And that's the kind of sort of experiment that you can do, because it doesn't cost anything to try and do something like that. We launched that product in less than a month. It was just a punt, let's see if it works. And within 3 months, it became a meaningful, revenue driver of our business and an amazing customer experience. Personalization is kind of everything for us.
For us, we're kind of relying on our middlemen to do that personalization piece. As I explained, we've identified various niche online communities who already have their use cases, within those communities. All we're doing is enabling them to do what they've already come to us saying that they want to do. In 3, 4, 5 years' time, hopefully I'll be sitting in Lizzie's chair over there, explaining how we're starting to pivot that and to leverage that. But for now, from our point of view, we're just enabling those personal experiences that they already exist in online communities. We're just turning those online communities into little financial ecosystems.
Great. Thank you so much. Just say thanks to our panelists and enjoy. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.